Hey there, new people. My name is Melissa, but if you are one of my magical subscribers and you've been following along, then you already know that you can call me Missy. Additionally, if you've been following along, then you already know that I made this dandelion flower inspired dress and this dandelion inspired overdress. Today, we are making the last piece of the ensemble, and that means dandelion seed inspired fairy wings. I have never before made fairy wings for myself. I remember going to my very first Renaissance fair and seeing some absolutely dreamy fairy wings that were like $200, so I really couldn't get them. I was a youngster and I didn't have that kind of money to spend on some beautiful, well-made, incredible artistic fairy wings. Now as an adult who is constantly feeding her inner child, I am really excited to make some fairy wings. I feel confident that as my first ever fairy wing making endeavor, that these will not be as beautiful or perfect as the wings that I saw as a kid. But there's also something really wonderful about making something yourself and then wearing it out and about. I've seen various videos and tutorials about people making dandelion seed inspired hats and other things. So I'm going to be taking inspiration and a little bit of information from some of those videos. I especially took a lot of inspiration on the construction of these dandelion fluff seeds from Crescent Shay's video, who I will link in the description. With all of that said, it's time to get to work.
The idea behind having the wings of my Dandelion Renaissance Fae be representative of the seeds comes from the fact that the whimsy we feel surrounding dandelions is largely because of the way that these seeds fly away, carried on the wind. I wanted my wings to evoke the movement of these seeds in flight and hope that they might create an illusion that I might float away while wearing them. As I sketched out my design, I looked up images of fairy and insect wings for inspiration. For this next step, I took my sketch and my paper to the floor and started sketching out what I wanted my wings to look like. Ultimately, this is going to serve as the template for the support wires and also for the outside cellophane. I put this little foam circle in the middle because I had plans to have the middle part of the wings be a full puff ball so that the rest of the wings can be like the seeds that are floating away. I was just eyeballing things, but I still wanted to have a feeling that the scale made some sense. I was also trying to think about aesthetically how it would look from the front with the wings coming out behind my shoulders. After penciling everything in, I went over it again with some markers that I had on hand. I wasn't even fully certain at this point what color the cellophane would be, whether I was going to do just plain clear cellophane or if I was planning on using an iridescent. So I spent some time trying to visualize that, before realizing that I had to get my butt into gear and start making some fluffs to go on this thing. I wrapped some yarn around my fingers and tied it in the middle and then cut the ends, and then I brushed them out. I started with a wig brush that had come with a cheap Amazon wig for free, but I ended up using this comb more than anything. I just felt like I had more control with the teeth of it.
I am waiting for my glue gun to warm up while I talk to you about this. I think this looks pretty good. It's all right. A few issues though, and this is the reason that I'm warming up my glue gun, is that when I was brushing out the yarn, bits of it were coming out from the center knot. So I need to glue it all together. I'm gonna do that, and then I'm also gonna use fewer strands that I did when I did this. I wrapped it around my hand 8 times. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, I think maybe 5 or 6 would be plenty. We're just getting started. We're just figuring things out. So I'm gonna go ahead and keep doing that.
My first attempt at tying the little fluff ball with the hot glue to hold it in place was a little bit clumsy. I hadn't quite figured out yet how to keep the hot glue from going everywhere while I was tying the knot, nor had I figured out how much hot glue I ought to put on it. But this would just be the first of many, and trial and error is a great way to learn. Once everything was tied in place, the process was the same as with the first one. I do think that the hot glue helped to keep the fibers mostly in place, but it wasn't perfect. That's okay though, because all I need is good enough.
I think I like this density of fibers for my fluff. So I'm going to put it on this little foam half circle, and I'm going to add some of this glue to some water that I have in this cup here, and then paint it onto my little fluff and see how I like it.
I just kind of eyeballed the water glue mixture. I wanted it to be more dense than water, obviously. So I think that I ended up with somewhat more glue in the cup than there is water. And then as you can see here, I just used the brush to paint down the fibers of my brushed out yarn. And here's what that looked like when I was done with that. I just had to wait for that to dry, and while I did that, I went ahead and prepared more yarn to be fluffified. It was a lot of repetition, but once I got into the swing of things, it went pretty quickly.
Oh goodness, I look like E.T. Anyways, off camera last night, I got a whole bunch of these guys glued down onto some rounded surfaces. I prefer this amount of roundedness, which came from these foam balls, but I also put them on a globe and also this little foam wig head, but I just needed a bunch of round things to put these on so that I could get them all glued last night so that they would have time to dry so that I could do this next batch, which I already measured all of them out, and then I can glue those ones down and hopefully they can dry before too long today so that I can do another batch, and hopefully another batch will be enough. This one still needs to have the flyaways trimmed off the edges. This one has had those trimmed off already. So it's really easy to just trim them right off and make a big mess right underneath me. But once it's trimmed, it looks just fine. So let's get working.
I cut 14 yarns, and what do I get? Another fluff made for the dandelion dress. I got 1 week to make this all go down. I just might do it if I don't clown.
So yeah, I just worked and repetitively fluffed out some yarn and combed it, and you can see all of the fluff that came off of each of those. It was nice fluffy yarn. And then here you can see what I didn't catch on camera the night before because my battery died. Did I say that earlier? I'm not sure. Anyway, I probably should have saved all of the little fluff that came off of the puffs when I was combing them out. I could have made a whole tribble with them, or stuffed an animal or something. Not a real animal, a stuffed animal. Not that I really have plans to make a stuffed animal anytime soon, but possibly. In any case, I still try to resist the urge to just hoard everything. It's just such an urge. You know, like if you're a crafter, you know. And if you know, go ahead and just write, I know, in the comments right now. Anyways, with all the fluffs glued onto round surfaces, I needed to, yet again, make a whole bunch more bits of yarn. By this point in the process, I had become a one-person assembly line, starting with the first step, moving on to the next step, and then finally the steps after those first two steps. You guys can see what's going on. Anyways, while I comb these out, if you were able to look past my ashy skin, you may have noticed a red mark on my wrist. Funny story about that. I was at the store and I swatched some lip stain on my wrist and I kind of rubbed it in and it didn't come off and I was like, that's pretty cool. So then I walk away from the counter and my kids are like, oh, what happened to your wrist? And I'm like, I just swatched some makeup. You were standing right there. And they were like, oh, okay. And then I go to the next store and the woman working at that store was like, oh, what happened to your wrist? And I'm like, oh, I just swatched some makeup. It's makeup. And then I go home and I'm making dinner and my husband comes home from work and he's like, oh, what happened to your wrist? And I'm like, it's makeup. So long story short, if you ever want to look like you're injured, just, you know, a little lip stain. Welcome to another day of manifesting fairy wings to heal my inner child. Let's talk about what I did yesterday off camera because once again, I need a new battery for my camera. I painted glue onto more dandelion puffs and I took some off of the other ones. So now I have a good number. I need to make another batch, I think. I had previously not taken these off on camera, so I'm gonna do that today. I'm gonna actually film me taking these off. Also yesterday, I built this armature for my wings. I still need to put cellophane on it. They are real bouncy, as you can see. Not much I can do about that at this point. I probably should have gotten a sturdier wire. I knew that the wire that I got wasn't super sturdy, but I had this idea to do this whole twisting thing, and I thought that that would make it sturdy enough, and you know, hopefully it is. The cellophane is very light, but I will show you exactly how I went about doing this. These are just the top half of the wings. I still need to do the bottom half of the wings. We're off to a start. Is it a good start? I'll let you be the judge of that, I guess. I think that's a pretty good description of what we've got to get done today, so come, there is much to be done. Let's go do it. All right, the moment you've all been waiting for, how I take these puffs off of their things. So, I just kind of yank it off and then I've got a little puff. So one down, let's get some more. Some of these were a little harder to pull off than the first one, and I had to kind of dig underneath the puff to get an initial release moment, but they all came off pretty easily. And then once they were all off, I had to cut the edges on them all, and in case you were wondering, they floated like this. Not very well. I also decided to paint the twisty wires, just the ones that are poking out on my wing armature, white, which I did by getting some paint on my fingers and then just rubbing it over the tops of the wire.
It's time for me to get to work on figuring out this bottom wing. Look, I am going to measure from here. Start. There we go. Okay. All right, that's 48 inches. 48 times 2 is like 98, something like that, 96. 16, 4 plus 4 is 8, 9, 96. So 96 inches.
After going through all of that effort to figure out the math, I ended up deciding just to round up to 100 inches. Just thought that that would give me a little extra. This is the kind of wire that I used. In case you were curious, I'm not sure that that actually did a good job of showing the wire, but I just picked it up at a hardware store. But as you can see, I used a vise to hold on to one end of the wire while I laid it out up against a measuring tape. The vise worked great until it didn't. It was pretty heavy, but it fell over anyways. So here you can see me cutting the wire at the 100 mark. Again and again and again, I cut one wire for each of the poking out bits of the wing. So for the bottom half of the wing, that means I cut 6 pieces of wire, and I think it was 7 for the top half. And you know, I could go back and check just to make sure that that is accurate, but I'm not gonna. Here I'm putting all of the ends of the wire into my vise so I could measure it out and find the center of all of those wires, so the 50-inch mark. And when I found that point, I just kind of pinched my fingers on that part and then put that part of the wire into my vise so that I could begin twisting. But I found that if I just tried twisting it by hand, that the upper wires would get all messed up. So I needed to hold the upper wires and twist the whole thing all together. Then I brought the wire over to my template so that I could bend it into the correct shape for the center of the wings before moving on to the twisting of the lower wing segments. Once everything was in shape, I needed to separate the wire bundles into 2 equal sets, which you can see here. And now for a little number I like to call the twist.
Come on, baby, let's do the twist. Come on, baby, let's do the twist. Take me by my little hand. And I had another issue with my camera dying, but I got one side of the bottom half of my wings done. I need to do this other side, but as you can see, these are really long segments of twisted wire, and they're twisted together, but there are definitely some places where they are not super well twisted together. It's just really difficult to twist this long chunk of wire all the way down while not accidentally getting this top part twisted. And when the top part twists, it twists in the opposite direction of what I'm twisting. So I'll twist a little bit here, but then this stuff has been twisted the wrong way. So now I twist it back and then I get to twist it the right way. And the problem continues to move all the way up. And you can only twist like a section at a time, or else parts of it just don't want to twist together. So I'm going to go ahead and do my little monkey dance around the vise in order to get this twisted all the way up. It's about 12 inches that needs to be done on this side, and about half of that on this side. And then I can move into these segments. I'm excited to show you how I use my drill because my camera cut out just before I could really show that. Here we go.
I feel like when I was doing the center section of the wings, it didn't quite capture the ridiculousness of this process. Essentially, I'm just walking around and around this vise while holding the wire in some pliers. And the first time I did this, I did get very dizzy until I remembered that I needed to spot. But it works really well, so that's what I did. Next, I measured out the length of this offshoot, and then once I got to that length, I just pinched at that point and folded it. And then I grabbed onto the end of that fold with my drill, and then I could just hold on to the end of that with the pliers and use the drill to do all of my wire twisting for me. I'm sorry, I feel like I have said the word twist about 1,000,000 times. So make sure you're taking a shot of water for every time that I say it, and you will be fully hydrated in no time. On second thought, maybe don't do that. You might drown. Or maybe I need to think of another word. What about tornado? I still had to tornado the pieces in between the protrusions by hand. I guess I'm doing everything by hand. Well, except for the part where I'm using... You know what? You know what I mean. It was a lot of maneuvering the wire in a helix configuration using only my hands and some pliers, which made it all the more satisfying when I got to use the drill to maneuver the wire in a helix configuration. I mean, just look at that. Ah, such perfection. I have here my first attempt at adding the cellophane to the wings. It did not go well. So I'm going to strip all of this off and we're going to try again. Look at that. Oh, it looks like I put garbage bags on it. Luckily, it came off easily enough, if not all in one piece, and satisfyingly so. There were a few places that were a little tricky, but overall, no big deal. One of my challenges here was the fact that I wanted the ends of those wires to be poking out beyond the edge of the wing. So I couldn't put it on first and then cut it away. I mean, I guess maybe I could have, but I just felt like that would be too complicated, maybe a little too difficult. I did just cut away the top part, so I suppose I could have done that with both pieces. Anyways, at this point I was feeling really grouchy, but my husband stuck with me through my grumpy Gus phase and helped me get this put together. I had seen somebody somewhere on the internet use an iron to try and flatten the pieces together. So I had tried to do that as well, but it didn't seem to do anything. And in fact, using the iron on the first one was how I had burned it, which was partially done on purpose because I thought maybe it would look kind of cool and spiderwebby if I burned it, but it just looked like garbage. Anyways, I got to the end of my roll of cellophane and had to say good enough. I electrical taped the two wires together in the middle, and then I glued the fluffs onto the ends of these wire pokey outy bits. I'm not sure exactly what to call them. Perhaps I should call them dandelion seed stalks, since that's essentially what they represent. I'm not sure what else to call them. Truly, I am at a loss. Welcome to a new day. I tried those wings on last night and they're okay. After I got the wings done, I wasn't sure that I was going to do the central puff ball, but after I put the wings on, I realized that they really need the central puff ball. So that's what I'm working on today. Let's get into it. At this stage, if I had a melon baller, that's probably what I would have used at this point. But what I ended up actually using was just some metal measuring spoons. This is the tablespoon that I'm using to just gouge out the center of this floral foam half dome. And no, I did not plan for that to come out sounding so deliciously satisfying. Floral foam half dome. Floral foam half dome. I love it. Anyway, what I'm doing at this point is arranging the dandelion fluffs just to see approximately how many of them I would need to make stalks for, because I was going to use more wire to do that. After eyeballing approximately how long I wanted the first stalk to be, I then used that in order to measure out all the rest of the wire. And then I, of course, used my drill to go ahead and twist that wire together. I left an inch or two of wire at the end that would then be sitting on the inside of the floral foam half dome. I think the reason that I like that phrase so much is because it scratches the same itch in my brain as the phrase heroes in a half shell. And if you are still watching at this point, why don't you go ahead and leave a turtle emoji or a turtle power in the comments down below. Back to what's going on in the video. Basically, I lined up the fluffs that I had around the ball, and then I just kind of eyeballed where I would be putting each of the seed stalks. and then poked them through the foam. Then the little bits of straight wire that I had bent outward at the end of the wire stalks did their thing and kind of kept it in place in the foam. The ends of them kind of poked into the foam just a little bit, which kept them from moving too much while I was doing this process. And then of course I used hot glue to go ahead and attach the fluffs to the ends of the wire. And this actually worked best when I put a few dollops on the fluffs first, and then I did them one after the other. It gave some of the glue a chance to cool down just enough that it would stay put once I put it on the wire, but not so much that it wasn't going to stick. When I had all of the fluff stalks in place, I tried painting the floral foam half dome, but I really didn't like how it looked. The texture of it was just too porous. So I decided to go ahead and just cover it with some foam clay. At this point, with all the fluffs in place, it's kind of difficult to see what I'm doing, but I basically just got the clay in there and then tried to smooth it all together. And when I was done with that, I decided that I wanted there to be brown seeds at the ends. So I went ahead and made some of those with some brown felt that I had. I just cut out 3 little raindrop shapes and then I glued them together at the edges. And then I glued that around the bottom of each of the stalks and just kind of a little extra glue to hold it in place. And with that, it's time for the reveal.
All right, my first ever fairy wing creation is in the books, and I had a lot to learn from that experience. I really needed to use sturdier wire. The wire that this is made out of is not sturdy enough. It's fun how it wiggles a little bit, but at least up to here, I think it needs more structure. I didn't end up wearing these actual wings into the Renaissance Fair just because I felt like maneuvering through crowds and through crowded vendor booths, they would be very cumbersome. If I wanted to make these more maneuverable, I probably should have made them smaller, but I was kind of focused on the aesthetics, if I'm being completely honest. And also, with that in mind, the wire might not have been too bad if the wings were smaller. It might have worked out okay. But I do wish I had used maybe like coat hanger wire or something. Another issue is that hot gluing the fluffs to the edges meant that some of them have actually fallen off. I caught some of them, but others are just lost. So I need to reapply some of the fluffs. And I think instead of gluing them down, that I could actually sew them in place and then maybe glue them down just to keep them sturdy there. I did end up wearing this throughout the fair, and I felt like it really pulled it together. I'm so glad that I ended up making this. Again, we had the issue with fluffs falling off. I love how the two of them work together. It's so gorgeous, but like I said, the wings were just too big. The issue that I kept running into with this is that even though it was quite lightweight, this one strip of Velcro was not enough to keep it attached to my back. It fell off again and again and again and again and again. So I really need to have maybe 2 strips of Velcro and just really make sure that it sticks on really well. Thank you so much for watching to the end of the video. If you liked anything about that video, go ahead and hit the thumbs up button. And if you would like to see more of what I do art, I do crafts, I do home improvement stuff, I do random things. Right now we are reading a 100-year-old self-help book, just to see what that's all about. So if you would like to follow along with all the different things that I do, then go ahead and subscribe, and then I will be able to see you in the next video. Bye! I don't know what I'm doing. Let's get into some, let me put this on real quick.